In this video, I'm going to teach you how to build a great sport team culture. It's no surprise that the most successful teams and organizations at the highest level of sport and business are able to have sustained success year over year because of their culture. My go-to team culture resource that I teach and implement amongst all my teams, clubs, and organizations is a book by the best-selling author Patrick Lencioni titled The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So in this video, I'll explain what the 5 dysfunctions of a team are, and I'll also give you practical advice that you can implement with your teams to avoid these 5 dysfunctions and build a solid team culture. Let's get started. Now, the 5 dysfunctions of a team is a fable-based story following Catherine Peterson as she becomes the CEO of a technology company and realizes that even though this company has plenty of talent and plenty of funding, that they just can't seem to outperform their competition. She soon realizes there are 5 critical dysfunctions that are holding her team back. If you haven't read the book, I would highly recommend it because it's obviously been used by Fortune 500 companies, but it's also the principles have been adopted towards the military and of course, sport organizations. All right, dysfunction number 1, absence of trust. Now, in the book, Lencioni states, remember, teamwork begins by building trust. And the only way to do that is to overcome our need for invulnerability. Now, it's that last piece where he talks about overcoming that invulnerability that I really want you to focus on. Because teams that lack trust are unwilling to share new ideas, unwilling to communicate in an open and healthy way, and maybe most importantly, they are unwilling to take risks. I want you to think about this because playing a sport and being an athlete at times requires the willingness to take calculated risks that may not work out, that may result in some form of failure. So if a team lacks trust, the members of that team are going to be incredibly risk averse, and they're going to be unwilling to do anything that makes them feel vulnerable in front of the team. The easiest way to build trust is to place the athletes in a situation where they can be vulnerable with one another. One of my favorite ways to do this is to have the athletes teach each other something of value within their sport. Now, I talk about this in my How to Motivate Athletes video, but it also really helps them come together as a team because it forces the athletes to share new ideas, to communicate openly and honestly, and also they're taking a bit of a risk because they don't necessarily know how their teammates are going to respond to their advice. So that's hands down my favorite exercise. Now, there are plenty of trust building exercises out there, but what I want you to remember is that in any exercise, what you're looking for is you want them to be in a position where their ability to be successful depends on their ability to be vulnerable with their teammate. If you feel like you're in a better position to build trust within your team, hit that thumbs up button for me right now. All right, dysfunction number 2, fear of conflict. Lencioni writes, I don't think anyone ever gets completely used to conflict. If it's not a little uncomfortable, then it's not real. The key is to keep doing it anyway. Now, conflict avoidance is one of the most common dysfunctions of a team. And I think the real issue is that most athletes and even coaches see even the smallest conflict, like a disagreement, as a bad thing or as a threat. So we tend to avoid those at all costs. And so they don't get resolved and they just end up festering. So for example, you coaches watching this who have a significant other, if your significant other does something to upset you, and you choose to not say anything about it because you don't want to rock the boat or you don't want to hurt their feelings or you don't want to be accused of making a big deal out of nothing, if you avoid that conflict, does it help you? Odds are it doesn't. And if you continue to do this, if you continue to avoid that conflict and you only end up suppressing how you actually feel about it, that creates something even more toxic within your relationship, resentment. And this is the exact same thing that can happen to your team because teams that fear conflict only ever end up facing larger issues. If there's problems or disagreements that go unresolved, they don't go away. It just ends up becoming harder to handle down the road. So obviously a pretty simple way to avoid this is that whenever there is a disagreement or a problem. You as the coach or an outside third party needs to be willing to come in and moderate a healthy, open discussion, because if you just try and sweep these issues under the rug, it only ever ends up becoming a ticking time bomb on your season. If you've gotten value so far, make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. All right, dysfunction number 3, lack of commitment. To this, Linchowney writes, commitment is a function of 2 things, clarity and buy-in. Any members of your team that sit on the fence when it comes to commitment will make your team fail. This is because great teams understand that decisions need to be made and that those decisions need to be stood by. Now, this is incredibly important, especially for young teams, when it comes to getting everybody to understand what the team needs to be able to do to position themselves to be most successful. The central idea here is obviously you need to be able to have a team that understands its own identity. For example, I'll see this at times with some of the hockey teams that I work with, in that the team's best path to success is playing one style of hockey, yet some members of the team haven't completely bought into that and they're trying to play a different style. So then the team finds itself in a situation where one half of it is playing a certain style and the other half of it's playing a different style, and the coach is caught in the middle, frustrated with how things are going. It's at this time that the coach needs to be able to bring the team together to get everybody on the same page, because odds are one or more of the following are happening. The first thing that might be happening is that certain members of the team that aren't playing the style they need to think they actually are and just really don't have much clarity around what the expectation actually is. The second thing that could be going wrong is certain members of the team think that their skill set doesn't necessarily fit with the style that's expected, and they need to be taught how their skill set actually can help the team succeed. Or the third issue might be that certain members of the team just simply refuse to play the way the team needs them to, and until that is corrected, will simply need to receive less opportunity than their teammates that are buying in. Comment below if you have ever experienced any one of those 3 things with your team. Now, lack of commitment can also create our 4th dysfunction, which is a lack of accountability. To this, Linchowney writes, people aren't going to hold each other accountable if they haven't clearly bought into the same plan. Without team commitment, team members will almost always avoid accountability. Team members buy in and commit to an idea because they feel like their input matters and that they expect to be held accountable to that standard. Now, if they feel like their input is unimportant, they're not going to feel responsible for the results. And this lack of individual accountability will absolutely destroy the overall accountability of the team. So at this point, you can really start to see that if we get some of the things that we talked about in the beginning of this video handled, that's actually going to help us prevent some of these other dysfunctions from ever becoming a problem. Listen, we've all been on a team, whether it's in our sport or a job or any group trying to move towards a collective goal, where somebody on that team isn't being held to the same standard as everybody else. And we also all know how that story ends. All right, the 5th and final dysfunction is inattention to the results of the group. Now, this really happens when certain individual members of the team start caring more about their results and their success than the overall success of the team. To this, Linchowney writes, on strong teams, no one is happy until everyone is succeeding, because that's the only way to achieve the collective results of the group. Now, one of the biggest concerns that I see that young athletes have is that they get so far ahead of themselves and start to worry about how this season and their performance and how the team does is going to affect their ability to receive opportunities in the future. A really good way to combat this is to explain to them that if the team does well and everyone develops, that overall the team is going to have a more successful season. It's probably going to attract more attention. And now all of a sudden, because of this overall success of the team, everybody on the team is going to have more opportunities in the future. The fundamental mindset here is to help them reposition their thinking to focusing more on how can they develop, How can they help their team develop? And if they are able to do those things, they're going to be much more attractive of an athlete to teams in the future. Now, before you go today, I have a free gift for you for making it this far in the video. If you have an athlete that could really use a boost in their mental performance, I want you to go to trainwithperk.com/free guide. That free guide contains 3 easy to install steps that's going to help them be better mentally prepared for their next big moment. Once again, that's trainwithperk.com/free guide. All right, if you enjoyed the video, again, give me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. If you're new here, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And of course, make sure that you're getting over there and you're picking up a copy of that free guide. I'll see you next week.